Wonderful. Thank you, Sarah. So thank you for joining us today. I am Beth Thomas. I'm the board secretary for the ARMA Madison chapter. I am here in La Crosse, Wisconsin, which is about 2 hours away from Madison. But we have our other board members joining us from Madison or other areas closer to Madison as well. So we're so glad you can join us today. Just a recap of this workshop set of sessions. This is the second of our two-part interactive workshop where attendees are learning how to create individual retention labels in Microsoft Purview and then prepare your retention schedules for bulk upload into 365. So we did that last time, part one. And then today we're going to be building on that and showing you ways to automate and enhance record keeping with the Microsoft 365 tools. So we're so excited you could be here. Just a little bit about ARMA Madison. So our mission is to advance information management knowledge practices by sharing and exchanging experiences, by promoting opportunities for professional development. We have a great variety of members from public sector, private, government, quasi-government. We have members from finance, companies, insurance, utilities, higher ed. So we're super happy to have those of you who are our members here joining us. It's great to see you. And then also those of you who are not members or maybe not our members yet, we're glad to have you here joining us today too. Just a couple of program housekeeping items. So we will record today's session. Sarah's got that going for us already. And we will share a link to that recording to all who registered, as well as all of our ARMA board our ARMA Madison chapter members will receive that. Sang has been gracious enough to provide his slides for us. So we will have the slides, the recording for you. The Cadence group has gathered a couple of resources we shared out this morning and late last week as well. So we will be sharing all of that from today, as well as the recording and the recap or the materials from the part one session. So we'll get it all packaged up for you, send it right back to you. So just a reminder, please mute your microphone. We're going to go cameras off for bandwidth once we get through introductions here, saying as well. And then we do have time allocated for Q&A at the end of the session, but I got to tell you, we've got a lot to cover. So we are going to try and keep a certain pace today. But we have a spot for you to provide your questions for us in the post webinar survey. So please look for that link coming at you after this. And then Sang also has a team on the back end that's monitoring the chat, and we'll be happy to answer questions as we go along through the program as well. So please drop your questions in the chat, fill them out in the survey. We can share those back out with everyone as well. So just a little housekeeping. And then today about our workshop facilitator. If you were with us last time, you know how great Sang has been. You've seen him at conference sessions as well. I know some of my team has and had nothing but great things to say. But Sang is a Microsoft 365 Certified Expert. He leads Cadence Solutions M365 practice for all technical analysts, developers, business analysts, and solution architects. Sang has spent the last few years to large-scale projects for Cadence. He ensures Cadence values of on time and on budget with a satisfied client are achieved for each of their M365 implementations. So we're so glad to have you here, Sang. Why don't you go ahead and start pulling up your screen share. As you can see, we do have our pre-approval code that we will put in the chat for you if you are maintaining your IGP credits. We've got that code for today. There was also one for the last session we'll include in our recap. So we're super excited to be here and have you. With that, I'm going to turn off my video and I'm going to turn it over to Sang, and we're going to get rolling. Ready?
Awesome. All right. Thank you, Beth. Thank you for the introduction. So hi, guys. I'm Sang, and I am the Microsoft 365 technical team lead here at Cadence Solutions. And before we get started here, let me just do a quick intro of who Cadence Solutions is. So we are a service provider that helps organizations with digital transformation, including records management, implementations, migrations, and integrations. Founded in 2013, we've completed over 85 projects and migrated over 350 million documents. And a lot of our clients are actually based in the US, as you can see from the map here. And just moving forward. So in terms of Cadence, we started as a customer. Jordan Uterhagen, our founder, I think a lot of you might have already seen him from a lot of the webinars, conferences, and different sources. So basically, Jordan, back in the day, used to work at a municipal government, and they hired a big logo firm to deliver our records management and ECM implementation. And I believe after about like half a year, they burned a couple $100,000s with nothing achieved. And Jordan found that he could do a better job, and thus Cadence Solutions was found. Fast forward to present, Jordan and his team, so including myself, we were able to deliver all those over 85 projects on time and on budget to meet client satisfaction. Now, we are a gold and content services partner with Microsoft, and meaning that content services partners are a special subset of those partners that have access to more information from Microsoft, and we can help our clients better. We specialize in the realm of Purview, Syntax, SharePoint, and Power Portal, and we do much more than that as well. So that was the general introduction of Cadence Solutions. Now, we are going to go into records management advanced. In other words, automating and enhancing your record keeping. Now, but before we get into today's topic, I am actually going to turn off my camera for bandwidth. And let's see. There we go. And we'll get started. But before then, we are going to do a quick recap of day one. Now, before we do a recap of day one, I just want to launch a quick poll asking about licensing. So this is a poll. So do you know which license your organization has? This was a homework for people who joined on the day one session. So if you guys do know which one, please answer now. The polls are coming in, as I can see here. And it seems like currently about 50% of the people who answered the poll have E5 or G5 licenses. About 23% has E3 or G3, and 20% I do not know, 1% with E1, and 7% with others. And I think that's about good. Let's give 10 more seconds on the poll. All right, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, so the statistics are around the same. So 50% of you guys, or 49%, have E5 or G5, which is great. 24% has E3, G3, and 19% has they do not know. So if I click share results here, does this work? All right, so this is the result that we got from the poll. And the reason why we ask this question, and we do try to ask this question every time during our webinars, is because having that E5 license is important. Now, recapping from last time, let's see here. So license requirements. This is a recap from slide, the first day slide. So if you guys do have, was not able to attend the first day, just if you guys can follow the link, you guys should have access to the slide deck. If not, I'm pretty sure the ladies at the ARMA Madison will be able to help you on acquiring those slides. Anyhow, E5 license is required for automating your records management in Microsoft Purview. That said, while you can use E3, and E3 users will actually benefit from the auto applying using metadata, auto application of retention labels using metadata. E3 users will also have those features enabled if there are E5 users. However, since it is an E5 related service, they are in violation of their license agreement. So it is better to have all those users as E5 license users. Now that said, this is a quick slide, skipping from section to section. So just so you guys are aware, the two main goals for the first session was to transform your retention schedule to a Purview file plan and seamlessly classify your records based on information architecture. And we achieve these by looking at retention labels. Now, there's a difference between retention labels and retention policies. Retention policies came before retention labels in Purview, and they are applied to a location, so a SharePoint site or a team site, whereas retention labels are applied to a single item, such as folders, emails, or documents. And another main difference between those two is after that retention duration is up, retention policies cannot perform a disposition review, whereas retention labels can perform that disposition review. And last but not least, since the retention labels are based on items, we can start the retention based on when those retention labels were applied, whereas retention policies are only available for when the retention policy was start based on the creation date or the modified date of the items. Now, retention labels go hand in hand with label policy, and label policy is how you either publish those retention labels to a SharePoint site or team site, or define an automatic way of having those retention labels applied to your items. Those are what label policies are. And basically, in terms of what retention labels, there's three different types of retention labels. There's the regular label, record label, and the regulatory record labels. Now, the main differences are on this chart here. And in terms of regular labels, the end users are actually able to delete any items that are assigned a regular label. However, those deleted documents get stored in a preservation hold library, meaning that until the end of its retention duration, it is going to stay in that preservation hold library and remain there until the term is over. Whereas the record labels are different from the regular labels in the sense that users will be restricted from deleting those documents that are labeled as record labels. Now, there's two states of record label. There's the unlocked and locked. The main key difference is the unlocked records label, you can edit, but you cannot move across containers, meaning you cannot move across one SharePoint site to another. Whereas locked record labels, you cannot edit. However, you can move across containers if necessary. And you can toggle the unlocked and locked state if you want. And you can also, when you initially create the record label, you can create it as starting from the unlocked state or starting from the locked state. So there is those two different options there. And as for the regulatory record label, now this is the most restricting out of all the record labels, even restricting the admin users from deleting any items that are assigned with this label. So regulatory record labels always used with caution if your organization decides to proceed with it, was the main summary for this one. And then we discussed different ways to actually apply or classify your retention label. So manual classification would be actually just manually assigning those retention labels to your items. However, there is a lower classification rate, as well as it's prone to error because a lot of times the end users do not know what the retention schedule is, and they might end up applying the wrong retention label. As now going to the defaulted classification, we like to use defaulted 80% of our cases, and we try to build this into your information architecture, meaning that we try to apply a retention label on the document library level or on the folder level, so that those retention labels are inherited downwards from that document library or folder. Now, that said, last but not least, there is the auto classification, which is harder to deploy, so we try to use it less, but this is best for event-based retention. So what we can do is, using the auto apply policy, we can set up a KQL, which is known as a keyword querying language in Microsoft, that allows us to actually query the data that is the managed data that is stored within your SharePoint site. So let's say if it's a contract, we can set the expiry date is less than today's date, so it has expired. And if the file type is statement of work, then we can actually apply the label, and by applying the label, start the retention process. Now, the final thing that we covered on our day one was the static scope versus the adaptive scope. So scopes are where these retention labels are published, and the static scope is just on your retention label policy, providing the list of where to publish your retention labels, whereas adaptive scope is defining where to publish those labels separate outside of the label policy, so that your adaptive scope, your scope and your label policy is decoupled, so that you can use that scope multiple times on different retention label policies, so that if, for instance, if you have an HR department, for all the HR labels, you would want to apply it on that HR department scope. And once the HR department scope changes, you can just change that adaptive scope instead of changing each label policy if they were using static scope. Now, that said, that was pretty much the recap of the slides from day one. But let me just go over the functionality as well here so that everybody knows what they are, not just from the slides. So let me just go to here, records management. So in Microsoft Purview is compliance.microsoft.com. That is the homepage of Microsoft Purview. And we mainly played around here on the records management solutions area during day one. And here, as you can see, there's different tabs, but the tab that we're interested in, the tab that we are interested in is the file plan. And within the file plan tab, you are able to create a retention label. Now, as you can see, a lot of people were following along during day one, and they were able to create all these retention labels. Now, in order to create the retention labels, you just got to click on this create a label button and ARMA day 2 label. So once you have that label made, you can enter a description for the users and the admins here, as well as any file plan descriptors, including a reference ID, which can be used as an alias to the retention label, as well as some citations as well, if you guys decide to put citation here. You can also put business functions, categories, and authority type, but I'm just going to go over to next. And now there are 3 different settings on the labels here. Just label items, meaning that you are labeling the item, but you are not doing any of the retention capabilities. So if somebody decides to delete the item that was labeled, they can do so. And enforce action after a specific period also does not enforce retention. It just enforces certain actions to happen after a certain period of time. Now, that's why when it comes to retention labels, we always choose the first option here, retain items forever or for a specific period, meaning that the item will be retained and will not be deleted by the end users. When we do this, obviously Microsoft gives you the 7 years as the default time for the retention period here, but you can always customize or set it to forever. And you can start the retention based on when the item was created, last modified, or labeled. Now I'm just going to go click next here, and this is the option where we select what kind of retention label it is. Retain items even if user deletes. Now this will move the deleted item to a place called preservation hold library, where it is going to stay for the duration of its lifetime there. Whereas mark item as a record is the regular record label that we have discussed, and we have the options to either unlock by default or lock by default. Now you don't see the regulatory record option displayed down here because we did not enable that feature. In order to enable that feature, you do need a PowerShell script. Now I'm just going to retain items as delete. And finally, last but not least, these are the options that you can choose after the retention period is over. You can delete the item automatically, start a disposition review, or change the label, or deactivate the retention setting. Another option is actually run a Power Automate workflow, which released not too long ago, And by doing so, you can customize your disposition review process instead of going with the out-of-the-box disposition process in Microsoft Purview. Now I'm just going to go delete item automatically for this one. And then you just create the label. And that's it. So now once the label is created, I'm just going to click do nothing here just to see the label here. Day 2. And as you can see, the label is in an inactive state until they are published by a label policy, which is on the tab here. And we can publish a label by clicking on the publish label to create, as you can see. And then I can just publish ARMA Day 2 label here, search it. Oh, it's right here, add it. And we can publish it to adaptive or static scope, as we have mentioned before. Static being a set of scopes that I assign on this label policy itself, whereas adaptive would be a scope that has been predefined in the adaptive scopes. I'm just going to use the adaptive scope and show you guys what it kind of looks like here. These are some of the adaptive scopes that are existing in this tenant, and we did create this scope live together during day 1. So if you do want to see how to create these adaptive scopes, please watch the day 1 demo. Now here, I'm just going to add the scope here and click next, unique name, day 2 label policy. And it gives you a little summary at the end. And once I submit, what's going to happen is this label is going to be published to the SharePoint sites that I have defined in the ARMA Madison demo scope, which is just the ARMA Madison demo site. Now, the publishing of this retention label could take up to a week. So you just won't be able to see it today, but that's how you would publish a label. And there is the auto apply label as well, which where you can define a KQL, which is the keyword query to actually define how to automatically apply this label. Now, one thing that we did not look at last time was disposition review. So I just want to go over that as well. Actually, before disposition review, let's look at one other thing. Let's go to the SharePoint site. Sorry, I just have that menu bar on Zoom appearing on the top so that I can't click on the tabs. So applying the retention labels on the site. So that's what we also discussed last time. So I just wanted to show you guys that as well here. So on the library label here, this is a library that I created for applying the retention label on the library. So for this one, if you actually click the little information, actually the little cog wheel here on the top, check the library settings, go to more library settings. And within the library settings here, apply label to items in this list or library. If I select this option, this is where we can apply a defaulted label to that document library. We have that ARMA Medicine Day 1 applied here. And as you can see, the other retention labels that other users have created alongside the demo have been kind of published to the site. So they do exist here now, but we have selected the Day 1. Now, what this will do is on the library label, if I end up uploading a document to this level here, let me just find the document real quick. Let's see. Demo docs. So if I upload a document here, as you can see, a retention label gets automatically applied because we have applied it on the library level. Now, on any of the subfolder levels, the same retention label will get applied if I upload the document there. As you can see, the retention label has been inherited to subfolders within that document library. Now, if we do apply a retention label on the folder level, as you can see, this contracts folder has been applied a different retention label, not a one-day label, but just the ARMA Madison retention label. What's going to happen is if I upload a document here, it's going to inherit the one on the folder. So we can apply the retention label on the site level and on the subfolder levels to differentiate what kind of retention settings are applied on your document library. So we just wanted to show you guys those. And for the auto label policy, we won't be able to show you guys the label actually being applied because the auto label policy takes up to 7 days for that label to apply once the condition is met. So that said, now I'm just going to go over to the disposition review process. So as for disposition reviews, on the records management tab, I just went to a different tenant because it just has more items for disposition up here. So within our Cadence's, this other tenant here in the records management tab, if you go to disposition, you will be able to see items that are up for disposition. Now, for documents, so this is documents was the retention label for this one. If I click this little icon here to actually go onto the disposition review tab, I will be able to see all the documents that I have permission to dispose these items. Now, the reason why I do see these documents were because I was assigned the disposition review step for this one. If you are not assigned the disposition review step, even if you are the admin, you will not be able to see the documents here. Now, if I click one of the disposition review documents here, it does show you a little thumbnail or a little image here so that you know what image or what document you are disposing beforehand. And you do have other options to either extend, relabel, or add reviewers to this process. And the same steps are up here as well. And once you are ready to dispose this document, you can approve disposal and you can enter any comments or just click apply. And this will dispose Eddy Test 1 document here. As you can see, it's gone and it will be on the disposed items here shortly. It does take a bit of time for the data to load, but once disposed, it will show up on the disposed items. All right, I think I covered everything from day 1, and that was about a 20-minute recap. So let me just dive into day 2. Now, day 2, so records management advanced, so automating and enhancing record keeping. So this information will build on the day 1 information, and we are going to look at more. So this is going to be very technical. So keep in mind that there is going to be a little bit of familiarity with Microsoft Purview in order to follow along with the pace, I believe. But let's get started. All right, so the first, let's look at the Purview components here. And as you can see, records management was the component that we covered today. And today we're going to cover data classification and information protection, meaning the trainable classifiers, sensitive input types, and sensitivity labels. Unfortunately, today we will not be able to touch on e-discovery, data loss prevention, or audit and content search. As for e-discovery, Cadence do have a lot of webinars on e-discovery. So if you guys are interested, please visit the Cadence Solutions website and you will be able to see those webinars. Also, just quickly set something up here for myself. Sorry, I'm just trying to set up the slideshow on my screen here. There we go. All right, now as for data loss prevention, this is also more technical in terms of security. So we decided to not go over the data loss prevention today, and audit and content search. If we do have time and if people do have questions, we might be able to show them at the end of the day today. Now that said, let's go over to data classification. Now, before we dive into what data classification is, we are just going to look at the licensing information here. And as you can see, for data classification, E3 licenses can't really do much except for data aggregation, whereas the E5 license is where you can use all the functionalities of the data classification. So that's why we always like to ask what kind of license your organization has, and E5 is the license to go for data classification. Now, where does this sit in the Purview governance? So when we were looking at records management, that was the govern your data, which is the 4th and last step of this chart here. Whereas this sensitive data that we're going to go over today, the data classification is know your data. So this is the first step of the Purview data governance, and we are going to go over this today. Now, these are the agenda items. So we're going to go over how to identify sensitive data. And we're going to also look at custom sensitive info types, as well as exact data matching, trainable classifiers, and the reporting side of the data classification, which is the Content Explorer and Activity Explorer. Now, when it comes to how to identify your sensitive data, we do rely mainly on sensitive info types. Now, what sensitive info types or SITs for short are pretty much any data that your organization can classify as being sensitive information, such as bank account numbers, credit card numbers, healthcare card, or those are considered as your sensitive info types. And they are defined using patterns that use regular expressions, keywords, or any kind of other technologies to identify information as a certain type. And as you can see here, Microsoft actually has over 250 pre-built sensitive info types. And the last time I checked, I believe there were over 300 pre-built ones out there. So this includes even all full names, Canadian passport number, credit card numbers, US passport numbers as well, I believe, maybe not, IP addresses, general passwords, and all that. So if your information that you want to identify is within the pre-built sensitive info types, you can definitely leverage those. Otherwise, what you can do is you can build your own custom sensitive input types. Now, in order for you to build your own custom sensitive input types, you do need to leverage you got to rely on either regular expressions or keywords to define a pattern of what is considered as sensitive information. So as you can see from example here, if you were to define credit card, what you would do would be you would define your primary element using keywords or regular expression for credit card numbers. And you can set up a supporting element for the expiry date. So once this kind of information is found, it is recognized within your tenant as a sensitive info type of credit card. Actually, even if we have an example like this here, credit card is one of the sensitive info types within Purview that already exists, and we can go over that as well. Now, moving on to the other types of data classification, there is exact data matching, which we are not going to go over in depth today, just because they are more technical than other sensitive info types. And also one thing to note is that the exact data matching, what it does best is it is matching based on exact values instead of patterns. So the regular sensitive info types will based on patterns you define using regular expression or keywords. Exact data matching, your organization has to provide a list of data that you want to match it to, and that is the data where it matches within your tenant. So let's say if you provide a list of employee healthcare information, then that's where it will be looking for to match those values of your sensitive info types. So it's the result of using this will be fewer false positives, and it's more tailored to your organization's needs. Now, finally, but not least, the last type of data classification is the trainable classifiers. In trainable classifiers, we won't be able to demo it, but I can explain to you how it works. Basically, trainable classifiers, it takes around 50 seed content, so sample documents. And once you have those sample documents, you kind of collect those samples and train the model so that you define what you want to categorize these seed documents as. Once you do that, you train it with over 200 files containing good and bad examples. And once the training is completed, you can publish these trainable classifiers to your organization. Now, that said, there are already over 90 pre-built trainable classifiers that exist in Microsoft Purview. So we'll go take a look at those as well. Now, that said, let's go dive into the interactive demo for today. So the display name and the username and the password, as well as the Purview URL, is linked here, and I believe Anthony will also be sharing this out in the chat, and we'll give everybody a couple minutes to actually join and log in. So when you are logging in, just one thing to note is make sure to use private viewing or incognito window. You don't want to use the same window or Chrome or Edge window that you are currently using with your current account, because then it is when you type the compliance.microsoft.com, it is going to try to redirect to that URL using your current authentication. So you do want to use that incognito or in private browsing. So the information, I see that Anthony has posted it in chat. So I am going to go over to the tenant myself as well. So once you log into compliance.microsoft.com, this is the page that you will see. And I mean, can we get maybe a thumbs up or something to see if some people have successfully logged into Purview using these accounts? Okay, well, I'll just continue explaining the data classifications tab. So once you are in Microsoft Purview, the data classification tab is actually on the top left-hand corner right here, data classification. And in the data classification tab, there is the classifier tabs. And this is what we were talking about today. And we can start with the tradable classifiers, but as you can see, these are all the tradable classifiers that Microsoft has pre-built out of the box within your tenant. So there's agreements, bank statements, budgets, employee pension records, and all these different types. And these were trained for you to utilize within your tenants. Now, if you go to the EDM classifiers, this is not the pattern matching, but the exact data matching classifiers, where you can create using your own organization's information to exactly match your organization's information as a sensitive info type instead of relying on patterns. Now, finally, but not least, the sensitive info types tab here is where all these sensitive info types live. And as you can see, there's over 300 items here. And there's the physical address, different driver licenses, different account passports, and all that stuff. If I go into one of the sensitive info types here, I can go into credit card. We can actually view which items have matched with this sensitive information. Unfortunately, on this tenant, there's nothing that has matched, but if there are any matched items, you can see the matched items on this location here. And another thing that you can do is you can actually test this sensitive information out by uploading a file with the credit card number and then test. I'm not telling you to do it on our tenant because that is kind of risky, but you can do it. You can test it on your own tenant later down the road if you do have access to Microsoft Purview data classification. You can you can test these sensitive info types out. Now, in more detail, we can create a sensitive info type as well. And this is the part where everybody can follow along if they wish to. And so basically, again, to reiterate how to get here from Microsoft Purview, you click on the data classification tab, go to the classifiers, and within the classifier tabs, select sensitive info types. Once you're here, you can create your own custom sensitive info type by clicking the create sensitive info type here. Now, you do want the name to be unique, so I'm going to do ARMA D2 Soo Lee as my name here, and you guys can also put your initial, your name, so that it does not conflict with other people who are creating these sensitive info types alongside you. It does require a description of what this sensitive info type is trying to achieve. I'm just going to put ARMA D2 Soo Lee and move on from here. Once you have named and put a description for your sensitive info type, you have to create a pattern. So sensitive info types, as mentioned before, are based on patterns, and you need at least one pattern to get started. So once you click create pattern, you have all these items here defined. So I'm going to start with the primary element here. So this is a primary element that you want to identify. So if it's a credit card number, you would want to identify based on a regular expression or potentially a function. And I'll explain what functions are a bit later, but basically you can choose from regular expression, keyword, or function. The only difference between keyword list and dictionary is dictionary, you can have more items than a keyword list. Now, as for functions, they are predefined, specifically formatted numbers or examples from that has been tested used by Microsoft. So these include driver license numbers from different different states, different countries, or credit card numbers are also, I believe, here as a function. So if your organization decides to create your own sensitive info type and want to kind of leverage the pre-built functions, these are where you can choose those functions from. Now, regular expressions is pretty basic, as in you just define the pattern of what kind of regular expression that you want to use. But for simplicity, we are going to go over keyword today. I'm not going to go over keyword dictionary because it's just the longer version of keyword list, and you can import, export the data out using a CSV file. But when you are here on a keyword list, you can define the set of keywords that you want it to be classified. So you can choose the case sensitive or case insensitive. So if I were to create a sensitive info type based on a certain contract that I wanted to identify, let's say statement of work, I can put also SOW and just leave it here. And there are different matching, as you see. There's the word match and string match. Word match is an exact match, so it has to exactly match this word, whereas string match is just matching a partial matching. So if a statement of works, if there's an S at the end, then it would match. If it's SOWs, then it will also match as well if it's a string match. But if it's a word match, it will not match SOWs or statement of works. So that's the main difference. And you can also choose from existing keyword library here as well if you decide to do so. If you do create your own custom one, make sure the name is unique, because other people, this name, you can have, the name is the ID for this keyword list. So that said, it has to be unique, or otherwise it will overwrite other people's data. So I can just do pattern ARMA to Soo Lee for it to be unique. And then once I define the primary element, I can define supporting elements to go with that primary element here. I'm not going to do it today in terms of to save some time, but basically after this, you can have additional checks as checking the prefixes or suffixes, excluding duplicates, or starts with or doesn't start with, or exclude specific values. So these are some additional filters that you can apply on these patterns. And also you can define how confident you want it to be. So if you do have more supporting elements, you do want the confidence level to be higher so that it does match correctly. And the last but not least, the character proximity defines how close your primary element needs to be with your supporting elements. So that said, after you create your pattern, you can click next, and you define the recommended confidence level for this one, as because I chose high confidence level before. I have the high confidence level option here, and review the setting and create the label. I create the sensitive info type. That's pretty much it for creating a sensitive info type. It's very simple, but the hard part is defining that pattern to match your organization's need. So let's see if anybody else has created anything. Oh, okay, so there's somebody who created a sensitive info type along with us, but as other people create their sensitive info types, it will show up here as well. But what we can do with these sensitive info types is we can actually update how our records are being classified. So if you go back to the records management tab on the left-hand side here, we have the label policies, and within the label policy, we have the auto apply a label. Now, before, when we went to the auto apply policy, when we went for auto apply policy for retention labels, we chose this second option where the content contains specific words, phrases, or properties. This is how we identified using the metadata or a certain type of phrases or content to actually identify the information and label using label the retention, apply the retention label based on it. However, we can, if we choose the first or the third option, these are the options that I can actually leverage the data classifiers that we're talking about today. So if I choose the first option, apply label to content that contains sensitive info, I can choose different out of the box templates for sensitive information from here, or I can also choose the custom information from the custom policies. If I decide to go with the custom policy here, I can define which sensitive info types I want to include to be assigned the label. So if I were to actually click the sensitive info types here, it would show up all the sensitive info types that are within the tenant. And if I go with ARMA D2, maybe mine's not showing up here. All right, I can just choose this one, I guess. This is the one that I pre-built before, but you can choose not just your own custom ones, but you can also define different sensitive info types, like all full names or any kind of sensitive information that you want to classify this information, apply a retention label based on. Now that said, you can have any of these and you can add different groups to get more conditions such that it has to have one of this and or something in group 2. By creating this kind of structure here, we're going to go over the policy scope here. We can set the scope like before. I'm just going to go with the adaptive scope of the demo scope that we have defined in day 1 in SharePoint sites. And we're going to turn on the policy right away, and we are going to assign which label to us apply when this condition is met. So if I apply the ARMA Madison day 1 label, what it's going to do is, in the summary, as you can see, when we find that sensitive information within the scope of sites that we have defined here, any items with that sensitive information will be applied this ARMA Madison day 1 label. So this is an auto apply policy, and this is a further way for you guys to automate your retention based on sensitive information your organization has. Now, that said, we are hitting the 50-minute mark. So let's take a break here, and we will cover the data classification, the reporting side of it after the break. So 5-minute break.
Sounds good. I'll put up a timer here quick.
Sounds good.
As folks are coming back, I know we're sitting here talking. I'm sitting in a conference room with my team, so it's kind of nice to chat about what we think we can do here going forward. But as folks are coming back, I've got a poll up. So if you could just let us know how you heard about the program, that would be wonderful. That helps us figure out how to get our message out there best. Helps the Cadence team too. And Anthony, if you want to, in the last minute or so here, just take a look through the questions and see if there are any you'd like to share out the answers to. As we rejoin, you can get that started whenever you feel like you found something.
Quickly. Hi, so we just had a question roll in about renaming data classification. So before I get to that one, I'll respond in the chat. And then just above that, we only had one question previously in regards to licensing. So we sent 3 resource links. The very first one is going to download, I believe, as a PowerPoint or PDF. And that's going to be your richest resource for comparing the different licenses. That chart, unfortunately, does not include G licenses, so governmental licenses. Then the third link down, that one is specific to government licensing, and it compares G3 and G5. Generally, there is a lot of overlap between G and E. So if you download the very first table, that'll give you the richest experience.
Wonderful. Great. So I'm going to stop my share, saying you can go ahead and share yours again whenever you are ready here.
Sounds good. All right. Can everybody see my screen here?
Looks good.
Perfect. All right, let's get started. So we looked at all these different custom data classifiers that we saw. Now we're going to go over the reporting side of data classification, which includes the Content Explorer and the Activity Explorer. In terms of Content Explorer, what it can do is it actually looks at all the sensitive information within your tenant. So you have a centralized location to view all classified items. Now for that, as you can see here on these screenshots, if you have any documents with the Canadian Social Insurance number applied, they will show up on this dashboard. So that's the main benefit of Content Explorer, whereas the Activity Explorer now is different in a sense that it is more so seeing what is being done within your tenant. So it is to more so see what labels has been changed, what label has been applied, what auto labeling has been going on within your tenant. Now, let's just quickly take a look at these as well before moving on to the next section. So these will be more so on the data classification, Content Explorer, and Activity Explorer right here. As for the Content Explorer, this is to actually see all the items that has been labeled within your tenant. As this is a dummy tenant, as we can see, there are documents with all full names, sensitive info type classified within SharePoint and Teams. And if I click on the SharePoint folder here, I can actually go into details on which document, which SharePoint site, and which files have these sensitive info types assigned. And as you can see, these items were defined with these sensitive info types on the left-hand side. So this is something, if you guys do have access to your tenant, you guys can actually check it out, because if you have those sensitive info types, they will be showing here on this dashboard here. And Activity Explorer is actually seeing the changes on your tenant. As you can see, there's not a lot of changes that has been going on this tenant recently. So some labels being removed, some labels being applied. Here you can see them right here. So this, if you guys have these features enabled, it is a great way to kind of monitor your tenants and what is going on. Now I'm going to go back to the slides. And now we are going to dive into sensitivity labels. Now, sensitivity labels, what they are, before we go in there, we always like to discuss the licensing side. So as you can see, anything that you can do apply manually with sensitivity labels, you can do it on E3. However, if you do want to use those auto apply functionalities, you do need an E5 license. And also to apply sensitivity labels on Power BI, you do need an E5 license as well. Now that said, where does this sensitivity label sit in the Purview governance chart here? It's step number 2, protect your data. So to protect your data, we are using those sensitive info types that we have discussed in the first half of today's session. And we are creating sensitivity labels based on those and applying them. Now, what we're going to cover for this information protection area is we're going to discuss what sensitivity labels are and how sensitivity labels protect data and how to apply those sensitivity labels. And kind of like retention labels, sensitivity labels have their own label policies and the label scopes. And we're going to briefly look at the services that benefit from sensitivity labels as well. Now, what sensitivity labels are is they're kind of like stamps. So you know how on a stamp you can stamp on paper with classified information. That's pretty much what sensitivity labels are. But they're more in the digital format where it's customizable, and you can apply these sensitivity labels on containers or file. And also it is readable by other systems and can be used by later on in other Purview solutions as well. Now that said, sensitivity labels for your organization is custom, meaning that you can organize your content based on your sensitivity needs. So it does not have to be a defined set of structure. It can be, let's say, public, general, confidential, highly confidential, and it can be tailored to fit into your organization's structure for sensitive information requirements. Now that said, what does it actually look in action? It kind of looks like this. So when you on Word or PowerPoint, you have these options to actually tag your sensitive information on the little stamp icon there, or tag icon previously, I believe. Or you can also apply and edit sensitivity on emails as well. And as you can see from the example here, it's like public, confidential, highly confidential, and more. Not only on Office documents, but you can also apply sensitivity labels on containers, such as SharePoint site or Team site, or even document libraries. So that's other places where you can apply those sensitivity labels. Now, how sensitivity label protects data. I just mentioned that sensitivity labels can be applied on Teams, or SharePoint sites, or even document libraries. But more so, once you apply sensitivity labels on those locations, you get the benefit of actually restricting access. However, when we are talking about records management, we want to focus on protection at the document level. So what happens when you apply those sensitivity labels on a document? There's two main things that happen, which is the encryption and watermarking. So these are two features that you can or enable. You do not necessarily have to enable them, but these two are the main features that you can enable. The data loss prevention side and the reporting side is just another benefit of having those sensitivity labels applied. By having those labels applied, you can use it for your DLP policies later down the road, or use it for reporting purposes. But main two functionalities main two benefits are the encryption and the watermarking. In terms of encryption, when you turn on this encryption setting with your sensitivity label, what happens is that you can change the permission of this item with the sensitivity label applied. So you can restrict access or set the content to expire after a certain time period. And also you can do double key encryption or remove existing encryption if there are one. As for content marking, you can add a watermark, you can add a header or a footer. Those are the three options that you can add. And this is an example document of that content marking with the highly confidential sensitivity label applied. As you can see, there's a header on the top and watermark on the middle. Now, applying sensitivity labels. So how to apply these sensitivity labels? There's obviously two ways, kind of like retention labels. There's a manual way of applying these labels and automatically applying these labels. The manual way is pretty much simple. It is the way that you would just go click on the tab, whether it's on the top here, or as we saw, it might be that stamp icon or tag icon. You select that and you select which sensitivity you want to label it to. However, it's always better to automate this sensitivity label process. And by automation, we can create an auto sensitivity label policy to automatically apply sensitivity label or recommend to apply the sensitivity label based on the sensitive info types that we have discussed earlier, or any other data classifiers such as trainable classifiers and EDM, which is exact data matching. Now, that said, if those sensitive information is found, we can recommend or auto apply, and we can have the policy tip pop up. And this policy tip can be customized to your organization's needs. So now sensitivity label policies, as I mentioned before, is pretty much it is the option to apply those. Sorry, let me rephrase that. So sensitivity label policies are where you can publish these sensitivity labels. And unlike, while it's kind of similar to retention labels and label policies, sensitivity labels and sensitivity label policies can publish to locations, but these locations are users. So not SharePoint sites or team sites, but it will be users or groups that you publish it to. And basically, the reason being is that you can have all staff have access to certain sensitivity labels, whereas a special subset of employees, such as, let's say, legal department, have access to a different set of sensitivity labels, such as confidential, restricted, or something that is higher up on that hierarchy of order. Now, that said, the sensitivity labels and their label policies all have an order or a hierarchy, meaning the most restricting is on the bottom and with the higher number on the order, whereas the least restricting would be on the lower number of the order or the top of the chart here, as you can see. And you can rearrange the orders as fit as you need within your organization. Now, you can also set up so that when somebody tries to change a sensitivity label, they need to provide a justification to actually lower that sensitivity from, let's say, confidential to general. If somebody actually tries to change that sensitivity label, they need to, you can set it up so they provide a justification, and these justifications can be found by auditing your tenant. Now, finally, where these sensitivity labels are, the scope of these sensitivity labels, once they are applied on the users, they can actually be across your entire tenant, including on-prem data, not just within your tenant, but on-prem data or non-Microsoft Cloud and software as a service apps, as well as your on-prem data, including SharePoint Online, Exchange Online, Teams, and Microsoft apps and other platforms. Also, sensitivity labels can be applied on Power BI, meaning that you can apply it on your reports so that based on different sensitivity, certain users have access to certain reports and certain users do not. And finally, but not least, for sensitivity labels, services that benefit from sensitivity labels are data loss prevention, and which allows you to further protect the information that is leaving your organization and actually monitor that and send notifications to your admins to know what kind of data is leaving your organization. And also records management, since you can classify what kind of information is sensitive, and based on that, you could apply a retention label based on it. Now, that said, we are going to go into the next interactive demo session here, and we are going to create a sensitivity label together as a group. And after creating the sensitivity label, we can probably publish that sensitivity label and actually try to manually apply the sensitivity label to a document. Now, this is the information here. It is the same information, except that we do have a SharePoint site so that we can actually create a document and apply that sensitivity label manually. So that said, I am going to exit out of the slideshow. Go here. So we went over data classification before, and now we are going to go over information protection here. It doesn't say sensitivity labels here, but the labels on the information protection tab here. So in Microsoft Purview, information protection labels. Now, these labels are the sensitivity labels that currently exist within this tenant. And as you can see, the labels have their predefined orders, and a label can be a sub-label of another label like this. So general can be anyone or all employees. Now, when you create a label, you got to click the create a label button here. And once you do, you can set a name. So this name can be unique if you guys are following along with this label creation. I'm going to do confidential. And we can set a display name. And this is the name that's going to be up. So the first name is the name that's within Purview. The second name is the name that users will see displayed. And then you can set a description for the label as well. I'm just going to copy and paste all the information here for simplicity's sake. And also, you can label the color so that you know which color your label pertains to kind of see if it's general or more so public. You can assign green or blue, or whereas if it's more restricted or confidential, there's the darker or redder color that you can choose from. Now you can apply, and within here, you can apply into items, groups, or schematized data sets. I'm not going to cover this today because this is still in preview. But what we're going to do is we're going to just try to apply it on files. Now we can select items and just uncheck everything except files. Once you're done, click next. And these are the protection settings that we have discussed. The two key protection settings are approve or remove encryption, apply or remove encryption, or apply content marking. So I'm going to check both. We don't have to if you do not want any of these features within the sensitivity label. But if you do, you can check it and see what kind of options you have here. So in terms of encryption, you can either remove an encryption if there is an encryption, or configure encryption settings. When you configure encryption settings, you can have the permission, you can set it so that with the new encryption, you assign a new permission or let the user assign a permission when they apply the new label. We're going to go with assign the permission now to see what kind of options that we have for users here. And when you choose assign the permission now on the top here, on the bottom, you have assign permissions to specific users or groups. When you click this, you actually have some predefined ones that you can choose from out of the box. So you can choose all users within users and groups within your organization, or any authenticated users. The main difference being that if you do have external users authenticating to your tenant, this will include those external users as well. Whereas this all users and groups within your organization will not. Or you can add a specific email addresses or domains, meaning that it does not necessarily have to be within your tenant, or you can add users within your tenant. I'm going to just use this one, add all users and groups in your organization, so that once this label is applied, nobody from outside can actually access this information, only the users within your organization can. You can also set the content to expire on a specific date or number of days after the sensitivity label is applied. And you can also allow or disallow the offline access of this sensitive information so that you keep it, you don't let anybody keep it within their hard drive. And there's the double key encryption setting here if you do want to double encrypt for extra security. Now for content marking, since we selected it, when we enable content marking, we can add a footer header or watermark by selecting the options here. As for the watermark, we can customize. I'm going to just put confidential. And you can choose the font size, what color, how the text is going to be laid out on the watermark. It does not have support for images yet, but you can have any kind of text that you want as the watermark here. And you can, the same goes for the header as well, if you just put confidential, and same for the footer sign. So right here. So you can set up your content marking and click next. And this is the auto labeling feature that you can enable for your sensitivity label. So if you actually toggle this on, what you can do is you can create a condition to match this sensitivity label. So when I click the add condition here, and I can click content contains, I can actually choose sensitive info types and trainable classifiers as we have looked at it in the before the break. So if I choose sensitive info types, I can actually choose anything with all full names as one. I can create a group and I can name this name. Oh. And I can say, and credit card. So, and then I can add a different sensitive info type, credit card. I'm going to say credit card and physical address. And I'm going to choose another sensitive information type, all physical addresses. And what this will do now is it will match and auto apply this sensitivity label that I'm creating if there within the document contains a full name that is identified by the all full name sensitive info type, and there's a credit card number with the physical address within that document. Once this condition is met, it is going to auto apply the sensitivity label that we are creating today here. So this is an auto apply that we can set up here, right, on the sensitivity label. And we have two options, as mentioned before. We can automatically apply the label or recommend that the user applies the label. If it's recommended, the user will have a little button on the side to apply the label. Whereas if it's automatically applied, it will just apply the label automatically. And this here, display this message to users when the label is applied, is the way to customize this message here. So if I say apply credit card info was found with other PII, thus we are recommending to apply this label. This message is going to pop up to the end users. And we click next. And this, we can't select any of the options here on the group or sites here anyway. So I'm going to click next. This is a preview feature. So next. And you get a summary of your sensitivity label here. And you can create the label by clicking the create label. And this automatically created your sensitivity label. Now I'm going to publish the user's label to users apps here as well. Done. And by doing so, it creates the auto label policy here that we have defined on the auto label. And if I click create policy, it is going to create that policy on the, I'm not sure why it's doing that, but once you create that create policy, it should show up on the auto label policy here. So I'm not sure why it was airing out like that before, but as you can see, this is one of the restricted auto labeling policy created like that using the sensitivity labels. Now, in order for you to test out your sensitivity labels, you guys do have the link to the SharePoint site. If you go to the Documents tab of this SharePoint site that you guys have access to, and you click New Documents and Create Documents, So Documents tab, New, Documents. It's going to try to create a document in Word Online. And it does have a little pop-up here. Just click Yes. And the sensitivity that you can choose here is on the right-hand side, as you can see with the little stamp icon. This is the sensitivity, and we can choose the sensitivity here. Note that those sensitivities that we created today are not available because they are not published yet, but these are the ones that have been already published. And as you can see, you can apply these sensitivity labels here. And somebody has access to this document as well, and they are typing something, as you can see. And once so it is being co-authored by somebody else joining this documentation, but so I can't change the sensitivity labels right now, but if I were to be alone on this document, I can apply this sensitivity label. I'll just show you guys. This is the manual way to apply the sensitivity labels, and to automatically apply, I do have a different tenant open up just in case here. And if I have this let me just go to the right one. If I upload this document here, there is a sensitivity label, as you can see, that's applied to documents that are being uploaded here. That's because this document, I'm going to open it in Word, has sensitive information. So it has PII, including the employee social insurance number, name, because it's a W-2 form. This is sensitive. And actually, when I click the sensitivity tab here, it actually automatically applied that personal identifiable information, PII, sensitivity automatically. We did not have that notification policy tip set up for this one, but as you can see, I did not apply this, but it did apply automatically. And as you can see, it is applied automatically on the documentation as well. So that's pretty much the demo of sensitivity labels. And now, putting everything together, I'm not going to go back to the slide deck, but I'm just going to work on this environment for the lack of time that we have. But one thing that I wanted to show you guys as final piece of putting everything together that we have seen today is Microsoft Syntex. So I'm not sure if you guys are used to Syntex, but Syntex is Microsoft's content AI and the flow of work, meaning content AI to actually automate or ease your business process with some machine learning. Now, that said, Syntex has multiple features that are soon to come out, such as e-signature, Syntex archive, Syntex backup, Syntex translation. But however, the one that we're going to focus on today is Syntex document processing. So what Syntex document processing is I'll show you the models here. So basically, it's classifying documents within your tenant as a certain content type or certain document type. And this is being done automatically by you creating these models for those documents. There's 3 out of the box: contracts, invoicing, and contract, invoice, and receipts, which if the extracted metadata here is all you need to extract out of your documents, then you can proceed with these document types. Whereas there is the custom models as well. Note that this is not hands-on. This is not interactive demo. This is on the Cadence tenant, because Syntex do require a production tenant, whereas the tenant that we were working on until now was a sandbox tenant. Now on this tenant, you do have other Syntex models here. The custom models being teaching, freeform, layout. I'm not going to cover freeform today for the lack of time, but teaching and layout are the 2 big models. Teaching being pretty much a way to scan OCR your documents, and based on the content that's within your document, you kind of extract those informations out to classify the document as well as get the metadata out. And it works on a lot of different document types, including Word, PDF, PowerPoint, Excel, you name it. Whereas the layout method is more so the classic OCR experience, where you select the document where to extract the data out, and it does that for you like this. And it only supports image files or PDF files, but it supports a lot more languages, and it also supports line items for invoices that you guys might have. The reason why I kind of brought everything back to syntax was I just wanted to show you that with syntax, what you can do is, if I have an invoice model here, what I can do is, once syntax applies that invoice content type or classifies this document as an invoice, you can set up, oh, sorry, I gotta go to the teaching method here. But once syntax classifies document as invoice or contracts here, you can set up the compliance steps here so that you can actually apply a sensitivity label or retention labels. So I can just apply like a statement of work retention label, sensitivity label, and I can name this model statement of work. Now, how this all works, I'll show you real quickly here on the demo tenant here that I have. So this is the models that I have already created, pre-created before. And on this document library, if I do upload these different kinds of documents, what syntax is going to do is I have those models applied on this document library. So what syntax is going to do is going to apply those retention labels and sensitivity labels based on the setting that you have set up for the models. But it's not just doing that, but it is also classifying the content type of these documents to the correct content type. And it also extracts the metadata. It does take a couple minutes for syntax to run. So that said, we do have 4 minutes, and I'm just going to wait for this to classify right now. But are there any questions that were on chat, Anthony, that you want to kind of summarize?
All right, hello. Okay, I'm going to go over some of just the questions we had, and if there's anything else that's come up. I'm just going to scroll up here. So I believe starting at the top here, we have what permissions and roles are needed for content Explorer, Activity Explorer. So I did provide a link for that, and there's different role groups you would have to be a part of within Purview in order to be able to access that. I believe you have to be Content Explorer viewer or Content Explorer list viewer. You have to be given one of those roles, or you have to be part of a role group. I'm just scrolling up to see like the full list. So there was a question on that. There's also a question about if a watermark or visual marking is added to a document, can it be removed later? So you are able to change it, but you have to just provide a justification when changing sensitivity label, and then admin is able to check the activity center in regards to that. So we've got like another one coming in. I think there was also one about like customizing placement of sensitivity labels if you have content marking enabled within a document. And unfortunately, you're not able to customize the location. So if you do have existing information in your header or footer, it will just overlay on top of that.
All right.
We have a question in regards to how long will the users be able to access the sandbox?
We'll give you guys a couple weeks to play around with the sandbox. And to answer Tanya's question about where is syntax at, if you are talking about the location that I'm demoing from, this is our Cadence tenant. It is separate from the sandbox that you guys were playing around with, because syntax does require the production tenant for us to apply the licenses. And this is actually a licensed syntax environment here. And just on that note, oh, so syntax is actually, so Tanya was looking at our tenant to try to find where Syntax is at. It is a separate purchase that needs to be made, and trial is available for 30 days for free. So that is just something else to note. But in the last 2 minutes, I just want to show you the result of Syntax here. So this document that I uploaded live here, as you can see, the content types have been assigned to these documents. And I just want to show you guys that these are actual documents with those kind of information stored. For instance, the first one was an invoice. I'm not really sure how to remove this marking that was applied here, but anyhow, this was an invoice right here. As you can see, it's an actual invoice. And if I actually change the view to an invoice here, you can see that it actually extracted not just the content type, so not just the document type of what this invoice is, but also the information from the invoice itself. And it did the same for other document types here as well. So if I go to receipts, it actually classified the receipts here with the information from the receipts itself. Not sure if I can show you guys, but this was the Walgreens receipt that I actually took during my Las Vegas trip. And from this information, it was able to classify all the necessary information for that receipt. But what we are interested in is those retention label and sensitivity. So for the statement of work in W2 form, I have assigned the retention label to that model so that, as you can see, it has applied the retention label. I do have the sensitivity applied as well, but sensitivity does take a little bit longer to kick in. And that's pretty much it for the demo. Now we are exactly on time. So thank you so much for your time, everyone. And I'll pass the mic back to Beth.
Thanks, Sang. Really appreciate it. That was definitely a full session. Our team here, I'm working on sharing the screen. But our team here has already decided we need like a follow-up, talk about what we can take and the things we can apply, but we've definitely got our ideas going. So thank you so much for joining us, Sang, and Anthony and Denise for bringing this program to us today. We have a survey link that we can put in the chat for you. And then it'll also show up when you leave the call again today too. But as part of that survey, we are asking too if your feedback on these 2 sessions, but if there were a follow-up, maybe if that were something you'd be interested in, we'd love to hear what topics you would want to hear about. And then we're kind of heading into the summer break for the chapter. So the board, even though we're on a break, we are still already scheduling sessions for the fall and content planning. So we would love your feedback in the survey for that. And speaking of the board, we're also officially recruiting for board elections. So you'll receive an email this week with a call for nominations, and it's really a wonderful group to work with and a fantastic volunteer opportunity. So please consider sharing your talents with our chapter members and non-members with sessions like this. So aside from that, thank you again, Sang, for these 2 days and all the prep work that went into this. We really, really appreciate it. Anthony and Denise on the backside, you guys are great. This whole team has been fantastic to work with. So please feel free to scan the QR code there to jump on Cadence's, the Cadence Solutions newsletter. They have wonderful information on their site and then work as consultants as well. So thanks again for joining us. Keep an eye out for the follow-up recording material and that'll be coming to you by the end of this week. Take care, everyone.